So we're getting closer and closer to that 2 o'clock mark when the finance minister will deliver the medium-term budget policy statement. And economists believe the top of the agenda will be, of course, Eskom debt, the public wage bill and social relief amid tough economic times for the public and also the high unemployment numbers. But let's now take this discussion further with SABC Economics News anchor Nastassia Arendse. Nastassia, again, let's talk about the key points for those that missed you a little bit early on. Key points that really, beyond everything, the finance minister has to cover today.
Yes, so I think the key thing is obviously Eskom, which you mentioned, and some of the social relief aspects. But the one thing you and I were doing, and we started this thing off on Morning Live, was looking back to try to understand how South Africa got here from a fiscal position point of view. And we wrapped up our discussion trying to remind people that at some point in our history, we used to have an A-grade rating.
I know, that's shocking to me.
That was in 2001, where all three rating agencies had us at investment grade, which is quite interesting. But during that period, as we described it as the Mbeki years, and even though there were some gains, there were a little bit of what economists would describe as irony. So you have economic growth rates that is averaging 5.1%. You're having a budget surplus, but your unemployment rate is hovering around 36.4%, which is not necessarily working for you.
Right.
So even though they were trying to make these changes, and we've had so many policy programs from RDP to GEAR, did you know we had a policy program which wasn't really implemented? It was called ASGISA.
I remember the word. Yes, I remember the term ASGISA. Yes.
So just to remind the viewers, it stands for Accelerated Shared Growth Initiative, and it was introduced by the Mbeki presidency in the year 2006, but it was shelved when we had the change in leadership.
Right.
And then we were left with the two parallel programs, which one we refer to as the New Growth Plan, and that was under the Minister of Economic Development, Ibrahim Patel. Then we had the National Development Plan, which was under Planning Minister Trevor Manuel. But to just wrap it up for us in terms of context, again, I spoke to Kevin Lings, who is the Chief Economist at Stanlab, to wrap up the period for the viewers.
Yeah, let's
have a look.
At that point, it was redeemable. We could have turned that around. But at the same time, we changed leadership within government, within the ANC, and the new leadership started to take us in what we now know is a very bad direction in terms of fiscal control and issues regarding state capture and corruption. And so from there, the fiscal position deteriorated very dramatically, almost year by year. So we went through a sort of golden era, if you like, from about 2005 to about 2008, 2009, a very prosperous era, an era we would love to go back to. And there were many things that we did right. And it's a reminder about what South Africa is capable of achieving if we have the right policy implementation.
So I thought that's a nice way to wrap it up, just to remind us about what we're really capable of. But just to, I guess wrap it up, 2008, when we had the Zuma presidency, the financial crisis hit. So we went from having GDP growth that was averaging 3.1% to going into 2009 and seeing a 2.1% decline in GDP. So that led to about 2 million jobs being lost. But just to outline in terms of capital expenditure, what the actual government was spending on from 1994 to about 2005, they were spending a lot of the money on, new classrooms, making sure that new clinics were being built. I think between 94 to around about 2003, we did see about 1.6 million households receiving housing, 3.5 million households electrified, supply of basic services. So something was happening in the background. And just to go to the expenditure chart.
But those numbers have not improved?
Well, we've regressed a little bit, especially when it comes to the delivery of basic services. And we'll talk about that period during On Point. It gives the reason for the viewers to tune in a little bit more. But if we could have the expenditure chart, I think that's the next chart coming on. So that gives you a sense of total expenditure. And look at that climb.
Sheesh,
consistent. It is a consistent climb. And it just starts 2010, last 10 10 years or so. And we'll talk about 2020, 2022, which is the COVID period.
Right.
And that we'll talk about during On Point, and also what the future means looking at the spending picture and what the public sector wage bill did to contribute to all of that.
And what is the blue line that we're looking at here?
So the blue line is looking at the interest payments. So this is a percentage of total expenditure.
Right.
So, so this is what we're sort of tracking here against the government total expenditure.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I think essentially we've been hearing over and over again that we have a finance minister who's got quite a lot to prove today, right? And I mean, he's very newly in the position. Let's talk a little bit about what this medium-term budget speech is going to mean for confidence in his ability as a finance minister.
Well, the main one that I think probably the rating agencies will be paying attention to is what is he going to do with Eskom debt? Does the government really believe they have the ability to take it on? But at the same time, it is the elephant in the room. We do have an energy crisis that we need to get through that's hampering economic development and growth.
Yeah.
And we've seen some of the locally listed retailers, the likes of the Fushini Group, etc., talking about the amount of lost hours they've had to give up from a trading perspective as a result of Eskom and its problems.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the key thing that I'm going to be focusing on when he talks.
Yeah, then there's, of course, the massive wage bill, and I want to squeeze this one out of you. The massive wage bill, you've got the PSA and, public service linked unions saying, well, we're going on strike.
And it's the funny thing, he might actually have to give in, because when you're looking at CPI increasing and people being squeezed, it's a tight one. It's like, do I be really firm on my convictions that we can't afford it, or do I feel for the man on the street who's starting to feel the pinch because of these interest rates that we are seeing? So it's a tough one. I wouldn't want to be him today.